So hi again and welcome to the channel. My name's Craig Hamilton Parker. I'm a psychic, a medium, and I suppose a bit of a teacher as well. And I'm going to talk to you today about some of the prophecies of the future made from the Indian culture. Now, all the cultures all over the world have their prophecies of the future. I mean, most of the Western ideas are perhaps based on the Book of Revelations, for example, or from Christianity. Although there's hundreds of others, of course, in all around the world, peoples have made prophecies about the future since ancient times. Now, the Indian civilization is one of the oldest on Earth. Predates what we would call Hinduism today. It goes back to the Sanatana Dharma, which is like our ancient sort of teachings. How far back, we don't know. Historians say one thing, legends say another, but it goes back thousands and thousands of years. And in that time, there was written a great body of literature called the Puranas. And the literal meaning of that word is history of the future. Many different people contributed to this, and it was written before the age of what we call Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga started when Krishna came to Earth. They were the first avatar of this era. And in these in these 18 books of the Puranas, there is also over 400,000 verses. So it's a pretty substantial text. So I'm going to tell you a few of the ideas from it. And of course, this is only the simplest of summaries. It's worth reading them in detail. And different ones give different angles and looks at it. But they have a kind of a similar feel to them about the history of the future. Now, we are in what's called now the age of Kali. This is the goddess Kali, who's a pretty ferocious looking god. But it's the age of ignorance that we're in at the moment, and during this age there will be a decline from the previous yuga, as they call it. These are yugas, they're great ages. There's a lot of fascinating things in these Puranas that people have interpreted in different ways. There's a story in there, for example, that seems to be almost exactly the story of Adam and Eve eating from the fruit of the tree and fall from grace because they eat meat. So there's a slight twist on the story. There's also the story of Manu, which is the story of Noah, very much the same story that we see in the ancient stories of the Old Testament. So, you know, there's a fascinating body of work, even just for these type of things. But in the age of Kali, all the good qualities in mankind gradually deteriorate. And then we're brought to a very difficult crossroads, which some are interpreting as being this time that we're in now. So this is a time during Kali Yuga when greed increases, selfishness increases, people seek profit first. There's a lot of social divisions. The sadhus, they say, would flee to the hills and hide in the hills and not be seen by ordinary people. Go to the mountains, they said. There'd be no cleanliness in the world. And foreign countries, said, that would become meat-eating countries, would start to dominate the world, says the texts. And a lot of this, there's a lot of references into the slaughter of animals and vegetarianism, and how this brings a bad warlike attitude in people. The Puranas also predicted all sorts of things. They predicted the coming of Buddha. They predicted the future kings of India over many, many generations. It talks even about the invasion of the ancient Greeks. You know, you remember Alexander the Great got all the way into India, and it even talked about the coming of the ancient Greeks. And there's an absolutely fascinating piece in there too, where they named this person called Isha Messiah, okay, who lived in the Himalayas. And the many people believe that this is Jesus the Messiah, who, as many say, and I've made a video on YouTube about this previously, that Jesus actually, in his missing years, because he was while he was a young man, followed the Silk Road and went into the Himalayas and learnt with the Himalayan masters. And in fact, that the the wise men from the east, that came to his birth, were actually astrologers from ancient India, and that he learnt there. But that's contentious, but it's written there in the text of the Puranas, together with the Buddha and other religious people mentioned in there too, including Shankara, who revolutionized Indian thought really after the time of the Buddha. It even talks about the invasion of the Christians and the coming of the Western powers, and names someone that sounds just like Victoria, Queen Victoria, in there, and how they bring a kind of form of democracy, but also that eventually India would have self-rule. So there's a lot of really fascinating stuff in there of predictions that have already come about. So what of the future? What does it say about the way forward? Well, it talks a lot about mass meat eating as being the thing that encourages war and division amongst people. It talks about the rise of negative sort of human traits. It talks particularly about how people become bad-mouthed generally to each other, and how ego tends to rule the day. It talks about the sort of rise of what I suppose you could call bad people, but bad people with bad values who become our heroes. So it talks about how we begin to worship and look up to people with very bad values. You need to look at the sort of people we put forward in our societies today, who we model ourselves on. You only need to look at any television program and the people we set as our who's these heroes, who's these people we look up to, or our politicians, and we look at these people and say, are these really good quality people? Well, during this era of Kali Yuga, this is supposed to come on the rise. This is happening over a long period of time, but maybe now in the modern era, when things are moving very, very fast in the progress, or whatever we want to call it, for the world, we may notice these things. It says in there also that the goal of life is to fill one's belly, which is often the way. I mean, you only need to look at the adverts on television, don't you? And it's all about food, and it's about food and drink, a large part of the advertising. And, it even mentions in the Puranas about the idea of takeaway food, something that would have been inconceivable all those centuries ago when it was written. But they talk about that people would live by food that, it describes takeaway food. Madness. But again, it talks a lot about how food and attitudes bring about the deterioration of the human consciousness. We are what we eat, are we not? It says about how the old people will be neglected and will become lonely. It says about how marriage for many will be just based upon lust and not upon any other quality. It talks about the increase in atheism, and it says that it takes expert people to run a family, that you have to become a very skilled person to run a family, and that families will generally break apart. So it also talks about that youth will become unruly, which I suppose has been something for all ages, really. But it also talks about the advent of the cities, and that cities will become places that are very stressful. And it says how even holy places on earth will be filled with pollution. It talks about the destruction of the environment. And it even talks about how the land will dry up and how environmental disasters will come. Remember, this is being written many thousands of years ago. It says the future world will become very impersonal. Many people will become intoxicated. Many people will become depressed. And this is surely with us to this day, isn't it? Women, it says, will become like men. They will become aggressive and unchaste. Not me saying this. This is what's in the prophecies all those thousands of years ago. And it says ultimately illusion will increase. And I suppose that's also, when you say illusion will increase, it's just look at the way we live and breathe our mobile phones, for example. We're on games. We're completely lost in another world with those things. But out of this, there's hope, because it talks about a time when many people will seek to change the world and seek to try to find a spiritual way. to refine the paths of Dharma. There will be a period, and this Kali Yuga lasts for centuries. So this could be a temporary period. Some have said that this might be a period that could last about 2,000 years before we fall back into Kali Yuga again. Others are saying we're on the verge of the end of Kali Yuga anyway, so the Kali Yuga is going to be put behind us. But ahead of this difficult time now, there's a prophecy of a golden age. This is something I've talked about a lot because I felt that all the problems we're going through are a herald to this. But seeing it in the Indian text is very interesting because it confirms many of the things I've been talking about spontaneously. It talks about how people will develop new ideas and that there will be a spiritual revolution. And it even mentions in it that this would be a kind of an ethical revolution and even include kind of what it seems to be a description in it of a green movement. Of a return to a rediscovery not only of the ancient wisdom, but also a rediscovery of proper diet. Because diet, it says, is one of the things that makes people so bad. And if you look at the junk food we eat with all this takeaway food, you know, surely it has its effect upon human thought and human well-being. It talks about a gradual division, though, when the spiritual revolution comes, between humanity being divided between those that are spiritual and those that are like described as like a dark force, almost like demonic people, the super materialistic people. The Golden Age will therefore herald certain divisions between the religious people and also between the materialist type people. But it says that in this time, people can find their path by rechanting the holy names, that the power of mantra will be rediscovered. Now, since Krishna was the avatar for the at the time of the turning towards as we came into Kali Yuga, many people say, well, it's the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantras that are important. But I think it means much bigger than that. I think it means about the rediscovery of the power of mantra. For example, when I was in India, I looked at some of the temples and things there, and the people all believed that those great huge rocks were put in place by mantra. It's endemic everywhere. All the normal villagers I spoke to all believe without any shadow of a doubt that mantra could do incredible things. You know, is this the last sort of remnants of an ancient teaching, a verbal teaching perhaps, an oral teaching that is still there about the power of mantras, you know, and we see temples there that doors are supposed to be locked by mantra, and only a mantra can open those, like an open sesame type of mantra, you know. So, you know, I believe that the mantra has a tremendous power, and this could be one of the things that they say that in the age of Kali Yuga, if you use the holy mantras, they can be an enormously transformative thing for the individual. Not just the power of mantra to do things as like levitate, for example, but also the power to transform ourselves and make a better age. And so the Krishna one is a good one, but any mantra that has a holy element to it, whether it be a Hindu mantra or it be a Christian mantra, you know, Amen is a powerful mantra too. All these things have a tremendous power in this time. It also talks in there a few things that I find very interesting, because as you know, with my prophecies and things, I've been very, very concerned about China. I've said it a lot. I think we're going to see things really boil up very soon in China in the coming year or so. And there's a lot going on there with the banks and things in China, ordinary people being ripped off where they're not getting their money and things like this. We're getting lockdowns, we're getting misuse of the idea of stopping people travelling to protests by using COVID as an excuse and so forth. So we're going to see terrible things in China. But it talks about, it kind of describes what I think is the Chinese people, because these people are north of Tibet. Could be Russia, but it could be China, I think. And it implies that they're going to have a development of sea vessels now that are dangerous. And could it not be these new aircraft carriers? I mean, it rang alarm bells when they were supposed to be scrapping a aircraft carrier, and then they just copied it and made more of them and developed it, and they're pinching the technology all the time, perhaps with their sight on Taiwan. So this is also mentioned in the Puranas. It's mentioned in there that there'll be a rise of this dangerous force, which I interpret as being China. And the people of China look to their leaders for protection, and it talks about a great weapon being used that will eventually destroy the evil people themselves. It seems to be describing a sort of religious type nuclear war. Is kind of put in there. Now, I'm not saying that that's going to happen. It seems to imply in it that nuclear war would go on for years. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I'm just sort of talking about what the Puranas say. It will seem to be one interpretation of the Ramayana. There are 400,000 verses. There's a lot of text there. So there's a lot people could pull out and interpret. But I certainly think I was very interested to see in there this idea of the rise of China. But the big hope is this idea of a spiritual revival, that there will be a period of a golden age, but round about now, I think, which is going to be a time when people start to awaken and people will start to seek spiritual values and start to fight against this period of Kali Yuga. And I think this could come. Now, others will argue that this is a temporary thing. Like I said, that there'll be a period of a few thousand years, which will be in our lifetimes, hopefully, when there would be a gradual reawakening of Dharma, as they call it, of good values. But the Puranas look far into the future, actually, and it talks about the gradual, eventual decline of humanity. Now, whether we look at this as being happening now or whether this is something for the further future is open to interpretation. And it talks about how intense pleasures and amusements and sports will become the dominant forces in society. We could argue that that's already happening, but this will lead to a development of very shallow enjoyment in people, and this will become the great materialism force, and will lead people to become barbaric. And it talks about the end of culture, the disappearance of all culture, in favour of these things, and that there will be no more teachers in the world at this time, and the land itself will become barren. And it even talks about how a new species of human beings, or kind of human beings, develops across, possibly, between humans and another animal, and that this human type of form becomes cannibalistic and eats other humans. So is it something that's done in the future? Maybe. Could it be, if we thought about what could that mean by this, supposing you were to breed an army that was part human and part something else, we can do it. We can do all sorts of weird stuff with genes now. Suppose we developed a warfaring people that were predators and had a natural instinct towards cannibalism. So there's quite a lot of talk in the Puranas also about this cannibalistic idea, and that mothers will eat their own children because the starvation in the world becomes so terrible. They say that life will become very short. Even a short life of 8 years old will be considered a long time to live in these difficult times. So, often I think, I think the same with Revelation. People often get a bit carried away with the fantasies about how bad things can get. And I think it can also be, it does talk about eventually that the evil people will be wiped out, that eventually there would become a new era of Satya Yuga. And this would be heralded by a great avatar that comes on a white horse and drives away the demons and drives away the demonic people. And then there'll be thousands and thousands of years of peace, tranquility and joy. So there's an awful lot of human psychology with all this. When I look at things like the prophecies of Revelation, for example, I look at someone there. When we talk about the St. John, it wasn't the St. John of the disciples, it was another St. John, but that St. John, he lived in kind of an isolation, and to me struck me as someone that was going through a mental breakdown when he wrote those things. Is there also perhaps even in these Puranas some sort of tendency in people to want to, oh, it's all going to be so bad, it's, something terrible happened there in the woodshed, but never explains what it is. There's there's this tendency, I think, of humans to sort of like to be the harbingers of prophets of doom, as they call me on Wikipedia, prophet of doom sometimes. So yes, so there's a lot of human psychology with this. So I wouldn't take it over seriously, but I do think, well, I would, because there's an awful lot of prophecy in that's true as well. But I wouldn't worry yourself about it, because firstly, we seem to be at the threshold of what could be described as the coming golden age, the age of resistance against this and the spiritual awakening, and maybe all those other horrible things we talked about further, much further down the line in human history. Or maybe we're at the turning point, and all these things that have been described here, we could look at them all and say, well, they're all happening now, apart from that cannibalistic beings. So maybe most of it's right, and maybe the turning point is coming now for us. Of course, the ideas behind all these ancient teachings is that, ultimately, whether it's a golden age or it's a dark age, the human remit, the reason we're here, is to escape all of it, to attain moksha, to obtain liberation, to attain spiritual salvation. And that comes through enlightenment, through awakening, and through, whether in a dark time or a good time, the enlightened person would not worry for either, because it's not the external world that's important, but the inner world, the awakened world, where our consciousness is. And whether in all these ages, actually, as well, it talks about the power of mantra as a shortcut to help you get to those states. So anyway, there's a lot of food for thought there, and I hope you find that interesting. So I'll be doing a number more videos, of course, all the time about the future. I do my personal predictions about the future. This is a bit more of a general one today, but hopefully a little bit of food for thought there. You can go and have a look up of the Puranas, look it up on this. It's some info on Wikipedia, but there's also a lot more out there if you want to dig a bit deeper. So if you enjoyed this channel, don't forget to subscribe, and you'll get more updates for this type of video later on. And if you want to know more, also go and have a look at my website. Anyway, thanks for joining me. See you soon. Bye for now. So, would you like to know more? Come and see my website at psychics.co.uk, where you can buy my books. You can also read lots of free articles, and you can join our Patreon community if you like there. You can also book readings with myself and Jane. I do readings by Zoom and by email. Jane does them one-to-one at home. So have a look on the website, you'll find all that. And you'll also find our team of readers who do international work. So you can book a psychic, a medium, an astrologer there, and they're available now for phone readings 24/7. So visit our website, psychics.co.uk. You'll find a link in the description below.